Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cloud Wars Live. We are probing into the mysteries of the digital revolution and trying to understand the impact it is having on so many parts of our lives, from personal, professional, the spaces in between. And as some people say, it's hard to distinguish between the personal and the professional these days, but it's really been a remarkable couple of years. In the last year or so, I think we're starting to find our ways through this. And part of that that's been involved is companies have really had to focus on the types of decisions they make, how quickly they make them, what they base those on, and the quality of those decisions as the world seems to move faster and faster. So one of our favorite guests, Bonnie Tinder, who is the founder and CEO of Raven Intel, is with us today. Bonnie, always a pleasure to see you here at Cloud Wars Live.
Thanks so much. It's always a pleasure to be here.
So Bonnie, I think as always, you've got some great insights and ideas here, often tied into what you've got up on the blackboard behind you. So
Yeah.
what's on your top of mind for you today?
Yeah, well, as we've started doing, I have a quote of the month for you. And this, I'm from the great city of Chicago and the land of Lincoln, being Illinois. So I thought this month I could do an Abraham Lincoln quote.
Uh-huh.
And so this one is, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe.
Great insight.
Yeah, and as we talk about decision making, whether it is just a decision that you have to make in life, or specifically with your audience that's faced with decisions around digital transformation projects or technology type of decision making, I think the same rules sort of apply. So, but Honest Abe certainly has some great wisdom to sort of start us off with.
Bonnie, that sounds good. I know that he had some interesting perspectives on lots of things, but in line with some of what you've talked about all along here, right? Of project management and understanding what you're intending and planning to do before you even start to do it. That just seems to make, extra good sense here today. So Bonnie, tell us about this. You've got some great thoughts mapped out about good decision making and, Abe's influence there about how you allocate the time to lead up to getting to those right decisions, Bonnie. So how's that going to play out, or how should it play out?
Yeah. Well, I think a successful evaluation and a successful decision process really paves the way for a successful end result. Whether it's a decision about a digital transformation or a decision about, should you move ahead with a particular software project, or even, should I hire a certain person, or should I hire a certain outside consulting firm? I think the way that you approach that decision, paves the road for a successful outcome. And, conversely, if that decision is not made well, there's little hope for success in the end for your project as well. So those I think that's the sort of overwhelming or overarching idea for the topic today. But I think really good decision making comes down to really 3 main components that I can go through. But again, and Bob, this, and talking with so many of the customers and the software vendors out there, is that good decisions really are the way to ensure success in the end in terms of solving a problem.
Bonnie, a good friend of mine he sort of collects cliches or bromides, things like that. One he told me several years ago, and you have to sort of say this with thumping one hand into the palm of the other hand. You have to say, he would say, proper planning prevents poor performance. He called that the 5 Ps. And okay, that's maybe a little dramatic, but what are the 3 key points for you, Bonnie? Can you hit those at a high level and then touch on each in more detail?
For sure. I think number 1, first and foremost, you need to know what your problem is. You have to have a well-defined problem statement. Number 2 is about this information gathering sort of stage. So you need to gather the information and the alternatives, and then also, really weigh the evidence. So vet what you've heard initially and the alternatives that you've heard, and weigh the evidence, this idea of trust but verify. And then number three is that you need to take action and move forward. So you don't want to rush a decision, but on the other hand, I've seen it so many times. Analysis paralysis is also, a big problem during a decision process. So the shorter and tighter that you can keep to a time frame, the better, because the worst thing is to make your decision by the time you're done with an evaluation process. You're so tired of the evaluation that you don't have any gas to move forward with the actual project itself. So number three is take action and be confident and bold in what you're doing.
So Bonnie, all of those make perfect sense here. I wonder, I just hear those. They're all challenging. They're all extremely important. But I wanted to ask you about number one, and particularly know your problem. My guess is that that's where it's probably the most difficult for both some organizations as well as leaders to really own up to that honestly.
Without a doubt. And I think the smaller that you can make your problem, the better. You're going to have a big problem, probably in the end, but in terms of solving a problem, if you can break a big problem into smaller problems and solve those in kind, you're typically better off. I think the other thing is you want to weigh, is the problem that you have worth solving? I mean, everybody has like 99 problems, but there's really just one problem that's going to make a difference that's worth the time and energy in solving. So you kind of sort of have to pick your battles in terms of, is this problem worth solving? And do other people internally believe that this is a problem worth solving as well? Those are going to be the stakeholders that you are going to need to get the budget and the time approvals to go out and fix that problem. So do others agree that this is a problem? It sounds like really basic, but those are sort of like overarching questions that you need to ask yourself. The other thing is, and this is a technology show. If you're listening now, you're probably involved with technology at some point. But the other aspect of it is I think so much of the time, everybody wants to solve a problem with technology, and certainly technology can solve a lot of problems. On the other hand, technology isn't going to solve something that won't be fixed through a software. And so it's like, just sprinkle some technology on it and that'll solve my problem. And I think really understanding, like, is this a problem that needs to be solved with technology? Is there something different here that is a better approach with, that doesn't involve like, let's swap out all our software or move this to the cloud? I mean, those are sort of obvious answers, but you really need to understand what is driving that, and what type of technology is the solution, as opposed to just assuming that your technology is going to solve your problem.
Bonnie, it's funny, in an episode that we recorded yesterday with Christian Anschutz, the title of that one is, I've got 99 problems and none of them is technology.
Dovetail that right in here, because absolutely that's huge.
And Bonnie, it seems to me too, what you were talking about here for step two of gathering information, evaluate the alternatives and so on. This challenge or the difficulty, the imprecision that some companies have in figuring out what is the problem, the longer they take on that, the longer it seems like each of the two if they're not really rigorous in identifying specifically what is actually the problem, they're going to have more trouble with step two and with step three. And it just seems that in today's hyper accelerated economy, companies just don't have that luxury of times like, let's go back to the drawing board or figure something out. So getting this right is absolutely critical.
Without a doubt. And if you're going to spend the most amount of time on any part of the decision making process, it's defining your problem first. because that's going to make the gathering of information and the action steps a lot easier. And I'll use a great, I'll put this in like sort of real life terms. If you all of a sudden start inviting vendors or partners in to help you evaluate potential options before you know what your problem is, I mean, you can boil the ocean in terms of solutions, because everybody's going to come in with a different approach, try to sell you on how they would solve a problem that you don't even know is your problem. And so you can really skinny down the alternatives in terms of your gathering of information if you have a defined problem up front, because you're going to know the type of vendor that you want to bring in, and you're going to be a lot more efficient in the quote unquote sales process, or those third parties that you have to bring in and weigh the options. You're still going to have to do that, but it's like you don't need 50 people coming in and sort of like expanding your problem or sort of presenting their angle on it. You want to be very defined in sort of leading the vendors in terms of your project.
Okay, let me take 1 second here. I want to offer a word from our sponsor, BMC. BMC wants to know, is your business on its A game? That's when systems are intelligent by learning from markets, where automation is paramount yet effortless, when technology and people work as one in an enterprise. The A game is your business at its absolute best. BMC calls this the autonomous digital enterprise. Find out more at bmc.com/agame. So Bunny, as the decision makers begin to move through this process about gathering information, the alternatives, you said that trust but verify is another essential point.
It is. And, back to the definition of the problem that we talked about earlier, you're able to so much more efficiently bring in the right vendors or the right, technology alternatives. If you've spent the time really mapping out your problem in the front end of the decision process. And what I think is really important is that you don't want to boil the ocean and have too many options coming in. You want to start off by talking to your peers, those that you trust, different perspectives from industry experts. So leverage your network and go wider. When I say industry experts, go wider than Gartner. Certainly they're going to have a perspective, but there's several other sources that you can consider as well. And I think you want to pay close attention to how vendors treat you during the sales process. And your gut is a good indicator here, because your experience during a sales process is, it's not going to be better once you sign a contract with a vendor. So you want to trust your gut in terms of, is this vendor listening to me? Are they able to, sort of define my problem back and present the right solution for it? So I think that's all of those things are really key in terms of the initial gathering of information. And then trust but verify. You want to make sure that you're doing your own due diligence behind the scenes and talking to references independently. Certainly Raven Intel is a great place where you can get peer review information written by other customers, and have that available to sort of vet what your partners are going to say. The partners or vendors, they're going to give you references, but they're going to be all the good ones. You're never going to get a bad reference to speak with from a vendor's perspective. And so that's where you want to do sort of your own due diligence in vetting vendors, and ask the hard questions when you're talking to other customers who have gone through the experience. Ask them what their challenges were during a project, and how the vendor or the services partner helped them through that, so that you can really get a good understanding of, the good and bad, because not every project's going to be all good. And if you hear that everything was positive about a project, you shouldn't believe that either. You really want to know, okay, so what were the positives or pros, cons, and and fully understand those as well.
Well, but a moment ago, I think when you mentioned about the need to, talk to those you trust, peers, experts, go wider than Gartner. I sure agree with that. And I was certainly going to say, one of my favorite alternative sources there is Raven Intel. So ravenintel.com, you not only are broad and deep in what you do, but the extra dimension of understanding not just what the big software companies are doing, but also the partners that they engage in, the individual evaluations and real world experiences of what business customers have gone through in dealing with those partners, as well as the big vendors, is extremely important.
Thank you.
Then, Bonnie, what happens, right? Because it seems, again, there's a lot of psychology here in projects and project management, decision making. What you're telling people, we've gotten to a point, okay, we've done the upfront work, we've defined the problem, we've looked at the different possibilities here. Now we've made a decision, it's time to act.
Yeah. And, you want to have done, your due diligence and done your homework. But at some point you actually have to act and move forward. So no analysis paralysis. I think during that, final decision step, you need to make sure your statement of work that you're getting back from your chosen vendor reflects the problem that you've defined in step one, and clearly states, the outcome and who's going to be responsible for what, at what period of time, and at what cost. The statement of work is a really important document to understand, and should be part of your decision process as well. Don't go with a vendor and then expect that, okay, you're just going to sign the statement of work with them. Make sure that until you have everything inked, that you have all the vendors continuing to participate, so that you continue to have leverage, even that in that final step. And then finally, you just got to do it. And move forward with the project, so you don't lose that momentum and excitement about what you're about to do. And once you've done it, do a post-mortem, measure the outcome that you have, and tell others about your experience, because that's going to be a key for them and help them make a good decision process. But definitely sort of celebrate your success in the end, and then do a look back and say what worked and what didn't.
Well, it's interesting. Just before we came on air with you here, I was talking to an executive from SAP named John Wookie, and he was talking about their new business network announcement. And one of the things that John's been, around the software industry for a long time, he's seen a lot of things. And one of the things he said that's really shifted with the move from on-premise to cloud is, he said, customers demand and expect continuous improvement, continuous better experiences, continuous ability to gauge, how are we doing with this? Are we getting closer to the goals? Are we achieving what we thought we would? So I think your points here about, it's time to take the leap, do it, move forward on that, and don't expect that that's really the end, because a good project, as you said before, if you do it right, it's the beginning. It's not just, the cutoff point of something.
Without, and it's a journey. And this is just sort of the first phase in your journey. And so starting this part of that off well, will ensure that long-term success is there, whether it's a digital transformation project or a piece of software, or some other type of internal change that you have. This is sort of the foundational step.
Yeah. So Bonnie, you've hinted at a few of these and touched on some, but I imagine you've got a pretty good list of gotchas for people to watch out for.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned before, Raven Intel has peer review. So we talk to customers once they've gone through the process and have done that evaluation and then finished their project. And we ask them, what are their lessons learned and what would they recommend for other customers, before they start a project like they did. Um, I think where customers typically get stuck, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, is not clearly defining the problem from the beginning before you start solutioning it or inviting vendors in to solution it with you. Because, if you don't sort of have that framework going in, the idea of gathering information and alternatives, becomes a lot less efficient, and you might go in a direction to solve the problem that isn't necessarily the most beneficial for your company. It's more, well, this vendor came in and sold me a solution, how they would fix it. So I think spending more time upfront to define the problem is a gotcha. I think the second thing is not considering alternatives beyond maybe one or two frames of reference. So my software vendor told me that this partner was really good, and we brought them in and we just hired them because of the recommendation of the software vendor. Or we've used this partner before, this consulting partner before, for a different project at our company. So we just, continued on with that, with that relationship, as opposed to going wider and getting more frames of reference there. And so, I would say that that's another one is, don't go just with one point of view or 2 points of view. Get as wide as you can. Don't boil the ocean, but get wider than just going with the recommendation of your software vendor. Ask some more opinions, and our magic number is around 3 alternatives that you're shortlisting before making a final decision.
And Bonnie, from something that you had said before about that, what I always find in these sorts of conversations is, does the person that I'm dealing with, or the potential partner that I'm dealing with, do they continue to get smarter with each conversation? Or do I find I'm repeating or having to go back and fill in some blanks that I've left before? Because, perhaps not everybody can catch everything the first time, but if in the big issues are escaping that person, then the best you can hope for is they're going to help you maybe define the initial idea that you thought was a problem. I think the best ones are going to be able to come in and say, you know what, Bonnie, we can work on that, but also, have you thought about this, this, and this? Because there are other ways that maybe this problem is manifesting itself in different ways. Or is that really the issue to get at? Rely on their experience, their expertise, to be appropriately, and a little bit of an agitator with you there, to ensure that you're defining the problem properly and getting smarter than each step of the way.
Without a doubt, you're going to go in sort of knowing your problem and having defined it, but then getting the industry best practices from those trusted partners, as you mentioned, that will really help you consider the larger ways to potentially solve it. And when you find a partner that can sort of challenge your ideas and make you think more outside the box, I mean, that's definitely a sign of somebody that could be really beneficial for your for your project.
Okay. And Bonnie, you had noted on here a 10-question article, right? Is that something you wanted to point out as well? A resource?
Definitely. And it's out on the Raven Intel blog. And essentially, we've come up with 10 questions to ask a potential consulting partner that'll be doing, a digital transformation project, or helping lead, the implementation of the software, whether it's an ERP or an HCM. type of software change, we came up with the top 10 questions that you should be asking of a consulting partner to really vet them and make sure that you're, looking at what they're presenting from all sides, and weighing your options best there. So that's certainly a resource if you're about to do that, that's available to you on ravenintel.com.
Well, that sounds like a list that everybody should be looking at there, Bonnie, available on ravenintel.com. And can you share one of the points from there, just to give an idea of what type of perspective is offered in this 10-question list?
Yeah. I think I'm gonna say 1A and 1B. So most important is, have you done a project like mine before? And when that gets at their experience, but you want to go a level deeper. So have you done a project like mine before? That sounds really simple, but does it involve the geographies that I'm about to do? Does it involve the type of software and modules that I'm looking at implementing? How many of these type of projects have you done? Do you have local resources in the geographies that we've done? And then finally, do you have the experience in my industry? If you're in manufacturing, have you done another manufacturing environment? Or if you're in healthcare, have you done other healthcare customers like mine? As narrow as you can get your sort of project scope and get them to provide specific examples of work they've done like that, that is really important. It's nice that they have, broad experience. It's nice that they have consultants with, lots of degrees and experience that they're bringing to the table. But if it's not the experience that you need for your project, then it's irrelevant. So you want to sort of cull that list down. And then I said there's a part B to that. And something that I'm super passionate about is and what are customers saying? So it's one thing to get from a consultant their words, and consultants are very eloquent in the way that they present their organization and their plan. But you want to know from the customer's voice, how did they do on previous projects? That's what we measure at ravenintel.com. But you want to keep them honest and say, well, what are customers like me saying about these previous projects? It's one thing to hear it from them, but now how can they back up the claims that they've made about their experience with this particular type of project? And so back to the trust and verify type of thing. Are they experienced, and do they have the customers to prove it? I think that's the 1A and 1B most important.
Yeah. Well, Bonnie, you sit in sort of a front row seat here for what's going on with not just the big tech vendors, but the partners they use. And then most importantly, the impressions and the experiences that business customers have in dealing with those folks. So thanks very much for this idea about, putting a lot of those different experiences you've had into the mix here, those real world things into, 3 steps to good decision-making. Thank you so much. And good luck to listeners about to embark on a big decision. Spend the first 4 hours of 6 sharpening your axe. Words to live by, Bonnie, from your fellow Land of Lincoln friend there, Big Abe. That's Bonnie, right. Thanks a million. It's always fun talking with you, and your insights are really, really helpful. Good stuff over there at ravenintel.com. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for having me. And folks, thanks to all of you for being with us here at Cloud Wars Live. Hope summer's off to a great start for you, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.